is all activated and rocking and rolling. So I invite all of you to say hello. Tell us where you're coming in from. If you want, you can tell us what you have on, because we're all working from home and we know we're not in business attire. But anyway, it is super excited to be here today with you. We're talking about how Rick, hi Rick.
Good morning.
Turned around a 15-year membership decline. And you may say, that sounds kind of interesting. And we thought so too after we had a chat with him. And that's the reason why we've asked Rick to join us today for this conversation. Just so I always like to remind us from the beginning, Bill Highway is the mastermind behind the Zoom and is doing all of the operational stuff. And of course, is a tech company that has solutions for all of us. Love them as partners and true supporters for the entire community. I'm with Mariner, Peggy Huffman, Mariner Management Marketing. We are your partner for really ramping up your association volunteers and understanding your chapters. And I am super excited to say that collaborating with us on this webinar, and the reason why we're able to have Rick with us is memberplanet. Now, memberplanet, I think some of you who came to CEX met them. They had been a supporter of this community. We were talking about, they were reading the crisis, Chapters in Crisis blogs. We were talking about, we wanted to have a highlight, a case story that kind of pulled in and tied in a bunch of the crisis stories into one, and talk about how you can solve some of those things. And the natural layer that makes a difference is technology. And so memberplanet was talking to us about what Rick is doing out there in California. And we said, this is perfect because it's an example of how you can find technology as an overlay that begins to address three problems. So I'm super excited. Thank you, memberplanet, for collaborating with us on this and for bringing us Rick. So speaking of which, hi, I'm Peggy. Rick, talk to the folks here. Tell us a little bit about the Northern California Golf Association and a little bit about you.
Sure. First and foremost, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are located. My name is Rick Rangel. I am, as you can see there on the slide, our Director of Growth at the Northern California Golf Association. I've been with us for essentially almost 9 years in June. Started out as an Assistant Director for membership, was our Director of Membership for 3 years, and then now have this new and improved fancy title to reflect all the things that we do. But located in Northern California, our office is in Pebble Beach, essentially Monterey. We are one of the lucky towns or counties that are under shelter in place. So I broke protocol and came into the office this morning to talk with everybody here. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you. And we won't tell anybody. In fact, we'll date this September so that you don't get in trouble for being in your office. Actually, this was pre-recorded back in January, everybody.
Correct.
All righty. So let's kick off the conversation. Again, remember, guys, this is about building community. And so Rick does not have like all of the answers, but he's got some pretty cool ones. But we really want you to take what he says and what we share today and make sure that you add your own flavor. You know, how are you applying some of this stuff? And of course, we're going to bring this conversation live again when we get to CEX, and I got some more information on that at the end. But remembering that CEX is the full community thing. Poll question for you all. You all ready? Get your fingers warmed up if you haven't already on the chat. So what chapter crisis has your association experienced? We're going to give you a whole bunch of them. Let's have Sarah go ahead and launch the poll. And you can do, it's multiple choice. So you had a crisis around mismanagement of funds or just fraud maybe, leader succession, maybe you had volunteer issues, outsourcing or hiring nightmares, you know, a CPA that, you know, walked away with stuff or just didn't do the job, or federal or state compliance issues, you know, when they don't get the right recording down, a natural disaster, which I originally thought, why are we asking this question? And now we are in the moment of this coronavirus pandemic, and it truly is a natural disaster from the standpoint, from many different standpoints. And so we just had a wonderful idea swap conversation, a virtual idea swap yesterday because we have to help our chapters, our clubs, our affiliates be able to handle that. Maybe it's legal issues rather, cybersecurity, website disasters, data privacy complaints. As you're doing this, I want you to know that we're going to focus today on website disasters and on the volunteer questions. But I'd love to see what crises have you been experiencing in your own association. What do you think, Sarah? We got some comments there. Let's close the poll and see what people are saying. Yeah, leadership, succession, and volunteer issues. You came to the right chat, because that is part of what drove Rick down his journey, and he's going to talk a little bit about how he's sort of pulled some of those things and brought it back together again. Now, I see website was only like 25%, but it's one of them, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. So, as always, go ahead, type in how you dealt with whatever crisis you just put in there. I love Rachel. If we've had a crisis, we're unaware, we're working on improving the relationship. That is priceless, Rachel. I mean, part of the thing is sometimes there's crises going on and we just don't have the relationship that allows us to be supportive or allows us to really have the information. So great point there. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about NCGA. Let's talk about those website disasters, struggling chapter leaders, succession plans. We're going to give you a little bit of input on a toolkit, and of course, we're going to send you on your way. I need to, as we begin to introduce this, grab your piece of paper from somewhere, right, and begin your notes. What's the question we have to answer today for you guys? What's the question we have to answer? Because I'm going to unleash Rick now to talk a little bit about his story, and we want to make sure we get to your answer. Rick, you are on. Give us an overview of NCGA so we understand where we're coming from. Then we'll ask you to share a little bit about the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So first and foremost, Northern California Golf Association, it's golf, but is it really just golf? We like to think it's a lot more. We have been around, as the slide says, since 1901, so we've stood the test of time. We administer the handicap index in Northern California, rules of golf, and are essentially the regional body of the United States Golf Association and our constituents. The only golf association to own a golf course, 2 golf courses, Poppy Hills inside Pebble Beach, Poppy Ridge and Livermore, which is in the Bay Area. We are a public membership, so that might be different from what most of you are. I think you might be a private membership or professional. We are public, and even though it is public, you have to join one of our 1,500 clubs to join our association. So you can't come to us directly. 1,500 clubs is broken down into, we have 400 golf courses, meaning we have a relationship with all 400 of them. They are in that 1,500. And then we have 1,100 clubs that, I don't know if we still use the acronym anymore, but they're SMURF, social, military, educational, religious, fraternal. And that's 1,100 of them. So we full spectrum. And then as you can see, we do some interesting things. We try to make our value proposition as unique as possible. We have social events where it's not competitive, where you can go out and have fun. You can have a beer with friends. It's not frowned upon. We do things that aren't just golf related. We take people out to the San Francisco Giants ballpark or to the Golden State Warriors. And we just try to create a little bit more to your underlying membership dues that you pay, so that every year that whenever it's time to renew, it's essentially a no-brainer.
Cool, very good. Well, with this many members and this many clubs, and so lots of moving parts, obviously, let's talk a little bit about your journey and about sort of highlighting the 3 areas that you've really saw some issues to deal with, and then how you went about this. So I know it started here, right? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I joined our association in 2011, and at that time we had roughly 158,000 members. Over the course of the next 4 years, all the way up to 2015, we hit our floor. Our floor was at 142,500 members. So if you can do the math, you can just tell that we are churning through members and clubs year over year. And this really started in 2000, the year 2000. And we didn't have anything in place to correct this. Definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting different results. And we were doing that. We didn't have our fingers on the pulse. We relied on our chapter leaders to renew their members. We focus on 3 areas, which I imagine most of you do. We make it into a golf acronym, so it's considered PAR: participation, acquisition, retention. And we saw some participation, but clearly we were missing the ball, if you will, behind acquisition and more importantly on retention. We had one funnel where members were coming in, then we had that leaky bucket syndrome where members were just funneling out, and we didn't have any stopgap measures in place. So in 2015, we had a change in management. Obviously, there was a lot of things going on. Can't continue to do the same thing, expect different results. And we identified certain areas that we could improve on. So we conducted a SWOT analysis, and we looked at what we were doing good, what we could be doing better, and what our weaknesses and threats were. And it was alarming. We had as Apple coined the term "think different," we were doing that. We were, living, how can we continue doing the same thing and expect to be here another 100 years from now? How do we support our golf courses? How do we support these, at that time, 142,000 members? And what we focused on at the end of 2015 was our lapsed members. We knew we had their information and we could target them. So we did a little internal tournament, if you will, and we called it Q School, which is related to golf. And our goal was to get 3,000 members from that lapsed category in less than 45 days, and we accomplished it. During that time frame, we saw that, hey, if we leverage technology, if we made joining a club simple, we could really win back those members that lapse as well as target new ones. So as we were doing this, we reached out to some clubs. We saw that they were just using a handful of different tools, disparate systems all throughout the place. Nobody really knew what they were doing. We didn't know what was going on. And that really led us in 2016, where we dove deep into our analysis. We went through an entire year of vetting vendors. And we weren't just looking for vendors, we were really looking for partners, and we had our wish list, and we had our nice to haves and our have to haves. And our have to haves, we had to have check boxes against all of them. So we went through a series of 21 different vendors, lots of webinars similar to what we're doing today. And at the end of the day, we identified one where we could consolidate all of them. It was what we wanted to do was reduce our overall cost. I personally love my technology. I imagine a lot of people on this call do. My personal experience was I had 18 different platforms internally that I was using. So, left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. I love my Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets, and when I exported it, it was stale dated. So what we were looking for was a true in-platform experience where we never had to leave. And we found that. That journey took us to memberplanet, obviously one of the sponsors today. And as we were going through the discussion, it took us a while. It took us roughly 6 months to finally get our terms of contract with them, and vice versa. That we wanted to make sure that they were good partners, and they vetted us just as much as we did with them. And it wasn't a vendor relationship. We were looking for a true partnership. And eventually they were identified as the true partners. And that was signed in 2017. I could tell you once a week, since 2017, we have a Monday afternoon phone call with them that we discuss key initiatives. Obviously, we're a lot further along than 2017, but 3 years running of doing Monday meetings. As a matter of fact, we had a Tuesday meeting this week. So it's been fun and rewarding.
Right. So let me just pause for a moment there, because what I love in the process that you've done, and I want to get to that question of how you rolled it out, because the understanding that there's a problem and then figuring out what that problem really is. And in your case, the problem really, it was about this mishmash and this system that didn't work and this inconsistency across it, to be able to then identify what will make a difference. But I heard you say the word partner. We weren't looking for a vendor. We were looking for a partner. So just a real quick, I don't know if you can say this in, 10 seconds, but what's a partner to you versus a vendor?
To me, a partner is someone that has a vested interest in our continuous growth, someone that we know in the event something happens, whatever that may be, it's a catch-all phrase, that we can contact them no matter what hour of the day. And believe me, we've done that. Like I said, we had this legacy system that we have 1,500 clubs, but only 100 clubs were using this legacy system. And it wasn't that adequate if you think about the ratio there, 100 to 1,500. And eventually, as we uncovered more and more about memberplanet, they were able to meet our needs internally, meet our members' needs and our club's needs. And that to me was the definition of a partnership.
Okay, great. So if someone just asked, which product suite did you go with? Well, it really is, it's memberplanet. And what you're saying is that because high on your list was, one product or one system to a product suite, memberplanet fit that connection.
Yeah, so the product suite we were looking for was, how do we consolidate communication? How do we consolidate events? How do we consolidate our e-commerce platforms, text messaging, communication? And we focused on 3 areas: communication, website, that's part of the communication, and then obviously commerce and participation. So those are what met our needs. And quite frankly, we never had to leave the platform, which was paramount for us.
Excellent. So someone just asked, and I'm going to take us to the next bullet too, because this is part and parcel of this. For you to be able to get the yes on memberplanet, how did you sell that to management? Because the folks on the call here, some of them, they understand the value of technology and solving all of these crises, but they're up against, they're pitching their budget line item alongside everybody else. I mean, learning management wants something and the comm team wants something. So how did you pitch this investment to management? And as you do that, sort of segue the conversation a little bit into once, you pitch it and then you got to get the rollout. So that's still keeping, in other words, these two questions are really around buy-in, right? So buy-in from management, buy-in from the clubs.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I didn't have this ready, but I don't know if you could see this. I'm going to add that here. This is how we sold it to our members or to our management. We checked boxes across each one of those, and we put the vendors that we thought were going to go to the next level. So there was, not to plug Salesforce, there was memberplanet, there was a couple other vendors out there, and we used what we were already spending. So for example, we were doing invoices, sending it out via snail mail. How much dollars and cents can we save through there? We created an Excel table, and on the one column we had, the feature sets. On the top we had the vendors, and then we also had our dollar amounts that we're spending on each one of these disparate systems. So as we were able to consolidate this tool into one, it kind of looked like this. Sorry here. We were able to consolidate all of those into one platform, and it ended up being a cost savings for us. So that was kind of a no-brainer. Now, when we were able to make that decision, we took into account all of the departments, all the department heads' inputs, and said, you know what, this was the right decision for us to make. And it quite frankly is saving us some dollars. Good.
I just wrote myself a note to make sure we get those images, because that's a huge part of where we need to. So buy-in came by putting it in front of them. How did you get the buy-in from the leaders, et cetera, and the staff that had to help you, right?
Right. So we looked at our clubs, and we put our clubs into 3 buckets. Those that are what we call premier, those that are doing okay, and then those that are just below the bar, and we went out and vetted memberplanet, or this platform, which we now adopted through them, and we selected 15 of our chapter leaders, hosted them, showed them the product. We did a rollout with them, a soft launch or beta, if you will, worked out a lot of the kinks, a lot of the bugs. It wasn't perfect. And then by the time we were ready to launch, we had essentially got through all of that. So they were not only great partners in helping us identify some of those solutions, but also giving us feedback that was essential. And we were able to take that back to the tech team at memberplanet, and they adopted that for us. Once it was ready, we did a roadshow, as I think you have it on there, where we traveled all of Northern California. We hosted them. We essentially wined and dined them. And it started with 15 roadshows. Then we went down to 10. Obviously, doing some webinars, but it was a big line item budget. Going into 2020, we knew that there was a lot of parts happening in the golf administration world, so we essentially made it mandatory. And that they had to adopt it once we felt that this was the right product at the right time. So make it mandatory until everything was ready. And right now, we sit at about 91% adoption rate throughout all of our clubs, and we're 3 months into the year.
Right. So I want to ask you about two different things. One is, I heard you say, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so it's not right to tell me, but I heard you say, we had this up, and then we went out there and we had some people test it, and then we went to memberplanet, and they did it. So is there, in that sense of, this is what we think, now let's get the member input, but then coming back to your partner, the tech partner, and then revamping some of that? So was there a change then in what you were actually going to ultimately offer in this roadshow?
Oh, absolutely. We identified areas that we thought we knew, and we made the initial rollout, and I'm like gung-ho about what we implemented through memberplanet. And then when we took it out to our lead team, the clubs, they said, hey, here's areas of improvement. And I'm a firm believer that feedback is a gift, and we welcomed it.
Yes, I love that feedback is a gift.
Yeah. So we took that feedback and we took it back to memberplanet and said, these are some of the areas of focus that we need to improve upon. And they accepted that feedback. We don't call it constructive criticism. We look at it as a true gift. And we were able to implement changes through them. And once that was corrected, we went back to those clubs, and they were once they were ready to sound off and approve it, then we were able to roll it out.
Yeah. So, and I also loved the roadshow, this notion of going out there and telling people about it. Now, for many of our organizations, including and Chris is going to respond to the one question. I made a question about the current currencies available through, which is not a question for you per se, but she makes the point, we have all these chapters, including those outside of North America, and someone else jumped in and and said the same similar thing. So to the folks that are in the chat, I'm going to ask this question. We think of a road show as getting in a car, and Rick has described it as getting in a car. He's got a tighter geographic base, although he is in California, so we know traffic ain't easy. But the thing is, when you need to get in front of your leaders, and tell us in the chat, guys, how could you make a roadshow work? What could you do? Could you send out different parties to different parts of the world? Can you So just go ahead and a virtual roadshow. Yes, Shelley. So I'm going to have you guys in the chat solve this for all of us in terms of how do we translate that, because I think, to Rick's point, how valuable it was to get in front of those folks.
Can I go ahead and chime in there, Peggy?
Yeah, can you please? I was going to say, ask you what your last comment or two for your, just on this slide, and then we'll get you talking to some other details. Go ahead.
So the roadshow idea actually didn't originate. It wasn't organic within us. It actually came from memberplanet. They did this roadshow when they became partners with the Air Force, and which was one of the key components for us going with them. They are vetted by the Department of Defense. They run the chapters for all of the Air Force clubs, and I know that they went to Korea, the DMZ zone. They went to Greenland. They sent out all of their staff to do roadshows globally. And as we were thinking, how do we roll this out, we actually leaned on them for advice, and it really
Nice.
helped us come up with our strategy.
Nice. Wonderful. Hey, that was a great little tidbit for us to learn about it. I think they're pretty cool. Awesome. And again, I know we're really trying to sell the idea of how do you find the solution, but it's nice that there's a partner available that can make a difference. Let's take this journey and let's kind of do these 3 dives. And I want to dive first into this chapter website disaster issue. And because this wasn't the most urgent one on the call, we'll go through this quickly so we can get to the other 2, which I think are really, really big things. But let's still touch on it real quickly, because I think that the chapter website, how current is this right now, right? People can't get face-to-face, so they really do need to be able to have the interaction with you. And we know that in general, branding is an issue. Not having good copy, right, that brings and draws you in. The usability can be big, and I noticed, Rick, that's one thing you're going to talk about a little bit is the usability and the ability to contact folks and let this be a 2-way communication. And then there's just, maybe it's not as important that you have a great SEO, but there are key issues around security and speed that have to do with the functionality and have to do with the usability that also is a functionality issue. We understand these to be the challenges. I think with you guys, Rick, you had some of the very similar things, correct?
Yeah, we lived everything that you just described in those bullet points. A lot of the copy, a lot of the content wasn't updated. It was ran by a la carte, or essentially by committee. We had, I think at one point we had 35 clubs using an internal system, but then we had roughly 100 clubs using, I hate to say it, like Netscape or Joomla accounts or other
Nice.
websites, and it was pretty stale, dated, and that was paramount. Like, if we want to roll this out and we want to update this with aligning to our mission, our brand, how do we do that at scale? And it was really, I think the next slide you're going to talk about it. I don't want to jump too far, but it was really easy for us knowing that if we provide this to the marketplace, we can actually go in there from the home office or from headquarters and update stuff on behalf of our chapters, our clubs, and really reduce the time that they needed to spend on it. So help us help you.
Yeah, and so I just happened to see a question for you, Rick, and so I'm sure that it's a question that is sort of overarching about your process, but certainly has to do with this one in particular, because this is them hands on the website. But someone said, what about the training? They said, what does the training strategy look like, and how did you overcome this "we've always done it that way" mindset? Particularly with telling somebody, if 90% of the clubs didn't have a website, well, we haven't had one till now. Why do we need a website? So how did you address the training issues?
Yeah, so the training issues for us was obviously a key cog to making this successful. What we did is we created an onboarding website so that once they completed a form, that form was then put into an automation process through memberplanet. Obviously, there are partners in this. We hosted webinars. As a matter of fact, I welcome anybody to come to our webinar this afternoon. We have one at 2 p.m. Pacific. So, and it's on websites, it's on events, and we do this on a quarterly basis. We've been doing it now for essentially 2 years, and what we do is we target the clubs that aren't where we think they need to be yet. So we have an internal roadmap, an internal checklist, if you will. And if they haven't connected the dots on all of these checklists, then we will go out and put them into a campaign so that they're the ones seeing the message, not the broad association. But it is challenging. I'm not going to lie. Our constituents, if you think about golf, is probably 55 years old, all the way up to roughly 80 years old. So I don't want to say technology challenge, but it was new and it was different. But I think we're in a better place, and I think obviously they're in a better place now too.
Yeah. Well, I think the sort of the managed rollout, if you will, also allowed you to kind of learn from a training perspective on, that didn't work, let's try it this way, or am I reading too much into that?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't one size fits all. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And I think the benefit of those road shows actually helped.
Mhm.
Webinars are great, but there is an intangible benefit when you're not social distancing and you're live in front of somebody. You can really empathize with what they're going through, and you can create those one-on-one connections.
Yeah.
Through that process, we identified that that was a pain point, and we've created a position within our entity that one person is now a what we call brand manager for clubs, and her entire job is to meet club officers, club leaders, and go through this process. And she's actually the one that's going to be doing the webinar
Wow.
today.
Okay, so I want to pause because that is so cool. So essentially, there's an individual who really is almost on call, like, you know, my contact at the office basically for this, but whose job is about this. So they've got a commitment, and they obviously are going to have a deep knowledge, which is
Yeah,
cool.
she is our resident
Okay.
expert on all things memberplanet, also our what we call memberplanet, but it's really our internal website builder,
Hmm.
as well as our
Hmm.
solution here at the
Right.
NCGA. It is, as you can tell now, a huge line item budget for us. It's the staff costs, it's the travel, it's the T&E,
Yeah.
but the ROI behind that is paramount. And I think, you know, it starts small, but then eventually it's going to scale,
Yeah.
and we're living it this day and age.
Yeah. So I had a couple of questions here about the communications, how some of the stuff integrates. I'm going to let us do this slide. And guys, you know, you always get the slide deck, so you'll get a little bit deeper on this. While I'm just going to, I want to kind of click through and talk a little bit about, because it answers some of the questions that are coming up there. I love Brianne was like, let's do a phone-a-thon. That is very cool. Cool idea for chapter leaders. But Rick, if you have a link for the call, the webinar this afternoon, if you can throw that on the chat. In essence, what I heard you say, you know, before is you did this deep analysis and you looked at all of these things, and I just want to let people see what made you choose these, and it had to do with the mobile optimized templates, it had to do with the drag and drop functionality, and those, and as you described this, kind of getting the updates to the right people at the right time. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the technology, because I think it's the application that is the really cool thing here. But is there anything about what's on the screen right here that you want to just kind of highlight before we move on, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I am not a tech guy. I am a former financial advisor. But I appreciate technology, and I don't know HTML. But as you look at this website, everything is drag and drop. It's similar to what you would find from Squarespace or
Okay.
Wix. And for us, that was paramount. We can make it mobile optimized.
Mm-hmm.
The theme that you see there with the California bear, there's 3 different themes there. So if they don't like the blue one, they can go to a grayscale, or they can go to orange. And each one of those actually ties into our branding, that logo that you see
Mm-hmm.
behind us. So we wanted to keep it consistent. And then for me, the mission critical issue was the zones areas. How can we push things out on behalf of our clubs and
Right.
update this and keep it lively, you know, continue to build on our value proposition. And that was paramount. Our clubs appreciate it, because the last thing they wanted to do was volunteer more hours to update it on our behalf. So it
Right.
was a win-win.
Cool. Very cool. I love the whole answer. So guys, we've done, I'm going to use the royal we, you know, Bill Highway has hosted all this wonderful series of blog posts on crisis communications. And so some of this stuff is there, but I wanted just to throw it out real quickly, because I know we're talking about a particular scenario in a particular platform. In general, if, you know, you can, depending upon the relationship, you can have chapters design and manager sites, you can have just set expectations but provide resources, you can have national managing the chapter resources, or you can have something where you provide a template and a requirements checklist. Don't feel like Rick's solution is the only solution out there, but do what he has done and determine what is his chapter club leaders need, and apply the solution based on their needs and what you can offer. And make sure that whatever you do, you are keeping in mind that busy volunteer. A couple things you might want to be able to share with your chapter leaders is the website resources. American Student Dental Association has a really cool how-to guide for chapter websites, which may be something you can emulate. Sigma Theta Chi has a wonderful quick start program for website management. So these are links that you will get access to, and you'll be able to pick up and do this for resources. One last thing that we've heard and we've seen is that if you're going to, whatever you're going to do, make sure that you're putting those in the concept of impact, not features. Finally, one of the things that relates to something Rick said, but is also one of the things that came out of our benchmarking study in terms of what nationals are doing, they're doing checklists which help guide chapters in making better decisions, like safe storage, like website hosting and domain registration, checklist, software subscription status, helping people sort of keep themselves out of trouble by doing these kinds of good checkups. Under the safe storage, one of the cool things that PRSA offers its PRSA chapters is we have a document library. So all of our critical documents, which I keep here, right? And we have a Dropbox for our leaders, but it's also archived or stored there on the national website, which just makes sure that there's always a backup. And finally, just tell them to check these things and make sure that there's some minimum standards there. Not that they're going to do like security, speed, and SEO, but then they can ask their webmaster these questions. Rick, like you, I am not a techie person, but if I know the questions to ask, I can do a pretty good job of asking the questions. So just a couple of quick things. If you've got a chapter disaster, technology guidance, you can always go to ICANN to check on the website domain. Start with the website audit. I think that's always the best thing. And always start with the low-hanging fruit. So like what absolutely needs to be fixed. Throw in the chat anything you can about your own chapter website crises. How have you solved it? What have you seen? I love Michael saying they've created replicable template within our main website for the chapters and conducted weekly online training sessions for site managers. Priceless. So keep throwing out there those questions, and let's move on to this notion of these incredible issues we have around volunteering. Unfortunately, we've got chapter leaders not suited to the job. We've got leaders who try to do it all, the superhero, and oh my gosh, if I wasn't around, the chapter would die. Yeah, that's okay sometimes. And then, they can't. Something has changed. They just can't do it. Which of these things have you seen in your chapter? Poll time, poll time. What type of struggling chapter leader have you dealt with? Go ahead, let's find out. Where are you struggling? Chapter leaders that aren't suited for the job, a leader that tries to do it all, doesn't have enough time. Go ahead. Sarah, can we have you launch this poll? Rick, let's see what's bugging our people online. I don't see do I see the poll coming? Woohoo. All right.
Going back to the website, before we go into this poll question, for us it was, how do we use keywords? How do we rank better in Google? How do we get our clubs found if a prospective member wants to find them? So we were able to go in and put in the keywords, and I could definitely say from a global scale, our clubs and our chapters Google rankings are a lot better than what they used to be. And again, it's technology is the overlayer, but how do we leverage that to help ourselves?
Cool. Apparently, no, nobody can see the poll. Let me try relaunching. Good. All right. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You guys can put it in chat. Oh, there it goes. Yay, yay, yay. Okay, give everybody a round of applause. All right, guys. What do you think? Not suited? Superhero? Doesn't have enough time. All right. Yes, Barbara, a leader who doesn't want to step down. Oh my gosh, yeah, and Rick is totally, we've all got that. I've got one who really should as well. Okay, Recycling, recycling, recycling. Now, recycling we know is good, but not of chapter leaders. Awesome. All right, Sarah, let's go ahead. Let's see what people said. I have a feeling, I have an idea. Yep. Oh, interesting. So the majority of you have had a situation with leader not enough time. Okay, Rick, this is why I love your solution, because it totally addresses the whole time issue. So let's talk about that, because this is what you found, right? Tell us a little about the challenges you saw real quickly, and then we'll jump into what you did.
Yeah, if you look at that first bullet point, that's a daunting task. 40 hours every quarter. That's a full-time job, and quite frankly, 99.9% of them are all volunteers, and I'm the lone paid one that doesn't have to do all this. Granted, it's my full-time job, but 40 hours a quarter, 160 hours a year. And what that comprises of is creating events, attending golf tournaments, getting out relative content. And then we have our chapters adhere to some curriculum that they have to do for us, whether it's through the United States Golf Association or internal, where we have to make sure that they are on par and giving out this handicap index, not to mention time traveling, quarterly meetings. So as we looked through that use case, that's quite a daunting task. I can't see the chat session, but I imagine putting yourself in their shoes, if you will. And what we did was, how do we fix the website issue? How can we push content out for them on their behalf? How can we track and measure email communication that they're sending to their members and look at the open rates, and then leverage, if they didn't open, how do we retarget and re-engage them? And collecting all that information and sharing that out to all of our clubs and saying, these are some of the best practices that we've seen, and here is how you help yourself. And it came in addition to knowledge-based articles, and just really eliminating as much rework as possible.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things, I just saw kind of a cool question out there, and I think that technology sort of helps with this, but someone said, how do you balance or create a mentorship between the superheroes and the people who may not be ready or suited for the job? And so I'm not sure that that's going to necessarily come up specifically in this, but Rick, you've got so many leaders that you're working with. Have you seen a way that you've been able to balance this kind of person who's just like trying to take it over versus somebody who, I don't know, can you balance it? I love Becky says, well, actually, superheroes don't make good mentors, and that's usually the case too. But you invested in the success of your chapter leaders, right? So as you're talking through this, maybe if you've seen that, you can give us an example, because I know the first thing you did was reset expectations, and I don't know if that could help in that situation.
It did. What we did was, as you show there, we do 10 regional face-to-face meetings throughout the year, as well as newsletters on a monthly basis. We host them at our golf course, give them free golf, incentivize them to come out. But one of the things that we recently partnered with is we actually learned it from through kind of a merger, unification, or acquisition, if you will, and it's through our women's clubs that are strictly dedicated to the women, and they have 16 regional representatives that are considered the mentor in place throughout their region. So if you think about that, that is a great way to filter everything up. So it goes from the club to those 16 regions, from those 16 regions up to us, and it really helps us manage by numbers.
Okay, and that also helps where you've got maybe a person who's not ready or not sure their skill set, or even somebody's trying to do too much. You've got this other kind of volunteer person here who's saying, wait a minute, hold a second, let me see what I can do for you.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it really helps the superhero. It helps those that are below the line as opposed to above the line. It helps them get to where they need to be. And it's really been a roadmap for success. And it quite frankly, it helps out our club ambassador, our club officer, that's the brand manager for our clubs, Lindsay Horton, really help triage and spend her time wisely, as well as look at solutions to help them. Just like every chapter out there, all the people on this call, We have our own issues where we have clubs that don't open their emails. We are able to identify them. We know that if a chapter leader doesn't open up an email after 3 times, we go out and reach out proactively to those club officers.
Nice.
Is it perfected? Absolutely not. But we look at ways to help ourselves. Going back to these regional face-to-face meetings, we use a technology or software that we send out a copy of this PowerPoint presentation that we do. And once we email it to everybody, we can see what slides were the most effective, and we can do it on a very granular scale. So for example, if this one right here where it says NCGA Leadership Solutions, if a lot of people land on that particular slide in the deck, we can see how long they look at it, and we use that information to our advantage, that we could say, okay, that slide is number 1 to our constituents, so let's move that slide up further in the deck, so maybe it's now slide number 1 or slide number 2. So we want to look at not only the information that resonates, but how do we help ourselves and deliver better content to them.
Okay, so hang on a second. I gotta make sure folks heard what you just said, because part of what happens is, and someone just said, "Oh, we do this newsletter and it gets well received," and yes, but what is well received, and how do you allow that to shift? And I love what you just said. So let me say it back, and then you correct me. So if you send out a communication like a slide deck from a quarterly meeting, you can see, as people are, A, if they opened it and looked at it, but B, you can see where they linger, so that you can sort of gauge this. Either they need more on this, or they didn't quite understand it, or we need to start with this. So you're able to change your next presentation or your next communication based on their behavior in that communication.
That's correct.
Okay. So what do you use to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's going beyond open rates. It's going beyond click rates. It's really diving into your relevant content, and is your content credible to your chapter leaders. And the platform we use, it's called HubSpot. In particular, it's called HubSpot.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So they have a software called HubSpot Sales, and we leverage that.
Okay.
And once a webinar, once our roadshows end, we immediately reassess. Well, how did we do? Where did the eyeballs land on those slides, and what time was spent? And then we reassess that and look at our content and look at our strategy, how we can better improve the process.
Okay. So now, Rick, I think that, so someone had asked, and I'm going to sort of make it a bigger question, was like, how many staff do you have? I mean, part of all of this is because of where you come from in your business development background. Is that fair to say? I mean, you're approaching this conversation differently than those of us who came up through the ranks of doing chapter management services and membership. You're kind of going back and saying, okay, this is a whole ecosystem of people that I'm moving and I'm motivating, and how am I applying it more of this BD and finding those things. But I mean, A, is that true? And B, how much staff do you have to help you with all of this?
So our staff is pretty small. You'd be surprised. For the Northern California Golf Association overall, we have roughly 40 staff members, but in my team, we have 5 of us. 2 of them are really dedicated to customer service. One of them is what we call brand manager for clubs, which we're talking about today. And then the other one is a brand manager for members.
Right there. Yeah.
And the members, are the individual members, the 185,000, and then the brand manager for clubs handles the 1,500/3,000 club officers. So it's not that big, and we kind of look at, how do we work smarter, not harder, and leverage technology as best as we can.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to move us along a little bit here. I realize I'm looking at the clock and everything, that we're really about 10 minutes. This has been such a great conversation, and I'm not sure we're going to get through everything, but I know someone did ask about what are your expectations about the regional reps. And so maybe what we could do is some of these questions that have come in that we may not get used to this, we can maybe touch base with you so that we can put in a blog post for you, because I think that what you're doing, your approach is you're coming at it from a slightly different viewpoint, and I love that. because you're making us think about this differently as more of a program area. But guys, in general, just some good tips that you can take a look at. I think whatever you're going to do, remember, whatever you've decided to do, it's the check-in. It is the check-in that allows you to be able to course correct. So just like Rick is saying, it's that coming back around, and he's using HubSpot to take a look at where people are lingering, but we can do the same kinds of things in lots of ways. And I think, you know, we didn't get into too much of this, but if you want to prevent these crises, you really have to kind of step back and look at this holistically, and you have to make sure that you've got the right people in the right seats on the bus. But regardless of that, it's going to be the clarity on the expectations, which Rick has done now with his club leaders, and that training, that continual training. I want to hit on a couple of things that you could talk to about chapter succession, because many of us have vacant leadership. Many of us have recycled leaders. Too many of us, even if it's only one of us, has AOL leaders, AWOL leaders, the folks that, you know, are in, but that they don't quite do it, or they don't get all the way in the door. And with how much you're asking of your members, I'm pretty sure that that you've kind of experienced this. Let's see, guys, real quickly, have you experienced any of these things in your chapters? And if so, we're going to ask you to get your fingers going on the chat to talk about it while we ask Rick a couple of questions. But vacant leadership positions, listen, hey, even here in Maryland, we've got that. Recycled leadership, yeah, we had that for a couple of years. It really impacted us. That's why we had to really spend some time not letting that happen. AWOL leaders, gosh, oh man, I could check all of these. How depressing is that? Well, let's see what everybody else has checked. Let's go ahead. Sarah, I know it's we're making it a quick poll, but what do we got so far? All right. Yeah, I mean, recycled was somebody's comment. That's probably going to be the biggest one, and that happens because we have otherwise vacant leaderships or someone's already departed, right? So let's talk a little bit about the succession issues that you ran into. I'm going to click through the slides that you gave us because I think, I want to have you just go ahead and jump to that. How did you fix it? Because we kind of understand, we kind of understand that we're all experiencing this. But having disbanded and closed clubs, I mean, many of us just have the errors that just kind of, just go almost silent, but we don't quite disband them. But to the point, what did you do?
We took a pretty proactive approach to this, and it's maybe not the best solution. I guess time will tell. But we were very, very bullish. We went out and sent a postcard. We did a multi-channel approach via direct mail and email to all of the club leaders that we had on file. So you're only as good as your database is. Mm-hmm. So we sent direct mail, we sent email, and it was a very polite letter, but we did say that if you don't provide us who your chapter leaders are going into 2020, your club will not be active. Your chapter will not be active. Meaning your members will not be able. They'll still be able to play golf. They just won't get a handicap index through the NCGA. And we use this bullish approach because at the end of the day, either A, they're going to disband, or they're going to leave us, or they're already AWOL. So we were able to identify those that we anticipate leaving already. But B, we were able to clean up our database, and it was an investment in time. It's an investment in future for us, in the future for us, for our club ambassador, our club brand manager, in her time really. And we identified those that miss emails. If they don't open up our content, then there's an issue. We will proactively reach out to the other ones and say, can we recycle some past leaders? Can we bring in some fresh faces, and can we do a mentor program? Time will tell whether this approach was the best idea, but I really feel that we were able to get roughly 60% of our database changed from this point last year. So we were able to update a lot of our club officers, meaning our data was pretty bad if you think about that. So
Mhm.
it's still a work in process, but I'm open to solutions if anybody else has any suggestions they want to add in the chat window.
Good. But I wanted to ask you this last question on the leadership development one. Now, I think that your incentives have got a really nice value in them, right? So when I read free gold gift cards, stay and play packages at resorts, so you really are saying you're volunteering because you're a player. Let's give you some time to play. Is that what I'm reading in that?
Absolutely. We know that
Yeah, cool.
without those 3,000 individuals or without any of our volunteer network, we wouldn't be where we are today, and we incentivize them. So if they are meeting all of our standards, we absolutely grant them a free round of golf at one of our properties. We reach out to our partners, which are the golf courses, and say, hey, specifically the resorts, if they could provide us a stay and play package gratis, and then we turn around and give them
Mhm.
back out to the constituents. So it's a win-win.
Yep.
Not going to lie.
Yep.
Amazon gift cards and Starbucks helps move the needle.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we just
Yeah.
leverage as much as we can.
So there's a laughter because, of course, the slide says gold, and it should be golf. But I think for your people, it is gold. So I think that it was a very apropos. Anyway, but I, you know what, I really love that, and I know for each one of us we have a free golf, right? We have a free something, and Starbucks are priceless. Even a coupon that just says go have a cup of coffee on me is awesome. Bill Highway does that. I love that when you do something for them. They're like, ooh, I've had lots of cups of tea. Thank you. All right. I think that the really cool thing that I've heard you say, and the chat has been wildly wonderful, just so often. I think idea here is resources, but I wish I had highlighted the word understanding there, because I think, Rick, you started from the beginning by saying what's going on here. Well, look at all this mishmash. We have to understand what's facing our volunteers, and let's fix that. And I love that. You could have done a lot of things, but it was really that understanding that brought you to where you are, which, you know, and you asked the questions, and that really makes a difference. I like the fact that you said, you know, we'll come in there with the emergency leadership recruitment. We'll come in here and we'll help find some people. And even if it means recycling somebody for a limited time, that's pretty cool. So guys, if we take what Rick has experienced and is sharing with us, and we bake that into our own organizations, right? We bake that into developing the leadership pipeline, creating a culture that is supportive, understanding, has accessible volunteering, and we invest in the technology, because at the end of the day, a lot of what Rick has done is find the technology solutions, and that is very much a today thing. We know that technology can give us so many places, so many ways of addressing things that we didn't have in our arsenal in the past. We have learned like so much from you, Rick. I love that. I'm going to throw one more question up there as yes, Stacy, it's micro volunteering. Yes, it is. It is at accessible. I should have paused on that because it's about the micro volunteering. And by the way, isn't it true, Rick, that if we put the right technology on it, right, we are turning these jobs into micro tasks, instead of these big lifts. So, and it sounds like memberplanet technology has allowed you to do that?
Yeah, from a global perspective, again, partners, it's really amazing what we can see from the global scale down to the regional level. I'm able to get the open rates, the click-through rates on a daily basis, how many clubs actually send out text messages and when they open up those text messages and how often they open up those text messages. So it's not limited to email. And it really goes back to that acronym: participation, acquisition, and retention. And it's not just for our members, but it's also for our club officers. And if we come back full circle, we can track and measure what our club leaders are doing. And to me, that is paramount, because if they're doing what we practice, then that's going to have a trickle down effect down to the clubs.
Oh, I can't tell you that it's like that, right? That kernel. We're gonna cut that out of the video and put it everywhere, because so much wisdom in that. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. It was amazing. I know we've come to the end of our time. I just want you guys to know that we've got a couple of additional words of advice here that we've collected in our conversations and we put in our blog post. I want you to know that at the end of the day, here are some questions to ask yourselves so you can say, okay, what can I do? What's that low-hanging fruit? What can I do that are going to make a difference? And it could be, but take the time, do some of your own self-reflection. I sort of feel like, Rick, you're a great example of that. Okay, guys, as you're getting ready to leave, some of you have already sort of having to chime off, we know, but what will you do tomorrow with the ideas we explored today? Put that in there as I do my closing remarks here. Here's the link, and I think that she already put that in. I think Sarah shaved it. The whole series is right here. Lots of great ideas. We know you have additional questions for Rick. Put those in there too. Don't worry. We'll make Rick answer all the questions. Big heads up. We're putting together a workshop on tapping chapters and engagement. Love the community brands is going to join us for that. They've got some amazing research, and they're going to bring all that to the flesh. We had a date, we had a location, and then we have the coronavirus. I mean, not personally, and now we're changing everything. So, what can we say? Meanwhile, don't forget CEX coming October 22nd. Guys, can we give a big round of applause to Rick for being a case study for us? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, guys, get back to work. Have fun. Stay in touch. Bill Highway, Mariner, we're here. Rick, last word.
Yeah, I gave you guys our webinar for today. It's at 2 p.m. Pacific. If anybody wants to join and see the platform in a live webinar environment, feel free to meet with us.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Stay happy and healthy.
Thanks, everyone. Happy and healthy.